Morning put the same copper on different hills and asked nothing about forever. I tied my rope belt, checked the knife wrap, felt the merchant's coin cold against the seam, and took rear rope as if rear rope were the only future I owned. The master cursed a mule into motion. Dust rose like a second road walking above the first. Ordinary light forgave what it did not notice. My name was still Sami when anyone used it. Most mouths preferred boy, thin one, you with the empties. That suit held. Names that stay small are harder to pin to a board. Kell walked middle rope with a bruise that had gone yellow at the edges like old fruit. He did not look back every 10 steps the way he had after the scrub night. Surveillance born of rescue had loosened into something quieter, a thread instead of a rope. Threads can still pull. I liked him enough to keep that truth in both hands. We left the bowl camp and its thin creek arguing with stones. Behind us, somewhere in gossip, a gagged hate might still whisper too. Ahead, the south road thickened toward greener folds and towns that keep sticks tall enough to count people who would rather not be counted. Between behind and ahead stood me, scab between the eyes like a failed star, law tighter than any cart rope. Split only in shadow, strike only as accident, live long enough to stock ages, become inevitable without becoming famous. Never let two mouths tell two different truths where a living witness can braid them. The second chapter of my forever had ended in lentils and one boy still. The third began the same way on purpose. Beginnings that look like continuations draw fewer priests. At the first long rest, the master counted heads the way misers count copper. 18 backs, 9 mules, oil jars nested in straw. He jabbed a finger at a loose strap near my hip and promised poetry for my spine if clay kissed dirt. I tightened the strap and kept my mouth dull. Dull is a craft I was beginning to love more than water. A northbound string traded shade for news. Coastal grain was dear. Client king lists grew longer. A man with stained fingers in a market 3 days back had been asking about a thin boy who fought like two when scared. The drover laughed when he said it, because miracles make good spice for bored roads. I laughed too, once, short, the laugh of someone who thinks spice is for other pots. Kell's eyes flicked to mine and away. He tore bread and talked about a coast door he might rent if wages ever loved him. I made small noises in the right places. When he left, I was still one boy with crumbs on his tunic and a cold circle against his ribs. Appetite walked beside me anyway. Put a copy on the ridge as eyes. Put a copy behind the last mule as rear truth. Be a chain of beads along the road. Easy roads end at cages, I told it without moving my lips. Appetite did not argue. Appetite never argues. It waits for arithmetic to fail. Near midday, the country changed its breath again. Scrub gave way to low orchards claimed by someone with enough spears to keep fruit on branches until sale. A shrine of stacked stones wore faded cloth and a bowl of oil gone rancid in the heat. Someone had left a child's sandal as offering, one strap broken, dust in the toes. I looked at that sandal longer than a man should look at trash, and felt the fold under my sternum lean toward a thought I had been postponing since the cave's nested wall outlines first step down into dream. Ages already lived, child wrists, boy wrists, the man I was not yet, archive, not imagination. The cave had shown the outlines the way a ledger shows empty columns waiting for ink you must earn with days. I had stocked only one column with real split practice, this body, this year, this thin back. The child I had been still lived in memory, like a town I could describe but not enter. Entering would be the next tax if the craft allowed taxes of that kind. Not on the open road, I told the lean. Not under orchard eyes. Not while the master's count still loved the number 18. We moved. Heat climbed. A drover offered watered beer for any fresh tale of rope crews. I gave him 3 dull sentences about greed and bad knees and let him invent the rest. Invented rest is safer than accurate beginnings. Evening found us near a dry wall that had once held a garden and now held goats with opinions. We camped. I took latrine duty without asking for farthest picket because wanting distance is a kind of confession. Alone with stink and flies, I pulsed a hand-width otherness and reeled it clean. The link answered sore and obedient. Nose dry. Good. Kell found me after with bread and no mint. We chewed. You always look like you are listening to a second camp, he said. Dust in the ears, I said. Makes echoes. He accepted the half answer because roadmen accept half answers when bread is shared, and because he had agreed to treat certain echoes as dust. He spoke of tall sticks he had seen once near the coast, men with boards and ink who wrote names as if breath were property. I filed the image next to Counter's calm and Rome's lists and the child's broken sandal at the shrine. Night thickened. I took a late watch. Stars were hard. The camp snored in uneven weather. I walked my sector, counted shapes that belonged, and once, only once, let the thought of a smaller wrist press against the inside of my own like a second heart that had not finished growing. The thought made the net shiver in a new key, not the clean twin note of same-age split, something thinner, higher, like a flute heard through mud. I put it away before the shiver became a birth. Tools remember impatience. I slept and dreamed the basin's milk light climbing a row of wrists that were all mine at different years. Child, boy, almost man, the nested wall outlines stepped down into dust and followed me south without footprints. I woke before the dream could become a speech and wiped my face as if sweat were the only liquid involved. Dawn put us back on Copper Road again. I checked the knife wrap, felt the coin, and took my place in line. No banner, no confession, no second shadow at my heels for the morning count. Only Sami, errand stock, one boy still, walking south with a secret large enough to outlive empires if he never let it look like one, and a new hunger under the old one. Not for more bodies of the same year, but for the age that stays inside the bone, waiting to be spent like careful coin where loud spenders die first. Sleep is a bad clerk. It misfiles fear next to hunger and stamps both with the same dream ink. On the second night after the Copper Hills, I slept hard enough that the camp's snore weather became a distant sea, and under that sea the cave came back without limestone, only milk light and the wall of nested outlines. I stood before them again as I had in the seam days, 2 thin wrists and a cut lip already becoming history. The outlines were not paintings. Paintings stay. These waited the way empty jars wait for oil, patient and accusing. Smallest first, a child with my curls and a belly still soft from years when food arrived without a master's stick. Then the boy I was now, leaner, rope-burn ready. Then taller shapes I had not paid for in days. Between the child and the boy, a thin gap, like a missing tooth in a smile you still recognize. I lifted my hand in the dream, and the child outline lifted its hand a breath late, as if distance inside time had grit the way distance on a road has grit. The net note rose, flute thin. My dream nose bled milk instead of iron. I tried to step into the child the way I step into a same-age copy, a lean and a birth. The wall refused like a door that knows your name and still wants a different key. I woke with my palm flat on grit and the taste of copper trying to become speech. Around me bodies slept as one each. Kell's breath was a slow saw, a mule stamped. Ordinary night held. I checked my wrists by touch in the dark. Same year, same scab of skin. No smaller bones had arrived while I bargained with outlines. Good, I told the hunger. Refusal is information. I did not sleep again easily. Instead, I reviewed what the cave had actually given, not what appetite painted over the gift. First split, same body doubled, one mind net, slap on return, nose tax. Panic births on the plain, messy, loud in the blood, static if stretched. Ghost shove against scar, half presence, wrong angle force, tools misused as levers. Nowhere in that list had a year changed on the bone. Archive is lived, I had told myself in the seam. Imagination is not archive. The dream agreed and still left the flute note under my sternum like a splinter. At dawn, I hauled water and kept my face stupid. The master sent me and 2 others ahead to mark a wash crossing before the jars arrived. Marking is lonely work if you choose the right companions. One man talked without cease about a woman in a coast town. The other spat and hated stones. I let them own the noise and used the gaps to press the smaller wrist thought again, gentle as flea scratch, while my visible hands stacked cairn rocks. The net shivered flute thin and died. No birth. A bead of blood found my upper lip. I smeared it into dust before the talker turned. Not yet, or not that way, or not while two living mouths could stack my failure into a story. We returned. The caravan crossed. Heat climbed. I practiced being one so hard my jaw ached from not doing anything else. Near rest, a girl from a side path herded goats with a switch and a song that had no interest in empires. She was perhaps 8, ankles dusty, eyes quick. She looked at me once the way children look at older boys who might steal fruit or might not. I looked back and felt no kinship of craft, only the arithmetic of height and the memory of being her height with a different hunger. The flute note stirred, and I crushed it under dullness until she and her goats became dust down trail. Kell dropped beside me at bread time. "You sleep like someone arguing," he said. "Dreams tax-free," I said. "Not always," he said, and touched his own bruise as if bruises were a language. Then he spoke of a town half a day south where a storehouse compound took men for debt if their names appeared on a board with the wrong patron's ink. He had heard it from a drover who liked frightening boys. I listened with my shoulders. Towns with boards are weather. Weather arrives whether you pack a cloak or not. That afternoon, the road bent past a limestone outcrop that was not my cave and still made my sternum flinch out of stupid loyalty. I did not go near the rock's shade. Loyalty to a seam can become a parade. Parades draw counters. Instead, I waited for latrine light again, the honest stink hour when no one volunteers company. Hand-width pulse, real, clean enough. Then I tried a new angle on the old hunger. Not push into child shape as if forcing a latch. Invite the year that already lived in me to stand beside the year that walks now. Memory as doorway, not costume. I remembered a specific day, a cracked water jar, my mother's hand gone from the story before I had words for absence, a priest's servant cuffing my ear for standing too near a bowl, the ear heat, the size of the servant's knuckle compared to my whole face, the way the ground was closer, smells taller, fear simpler. The net caught that simplicity like a hook catches cloth. For one dizzy breath, my hands felt wrong on the ends of my arms, too far, too large, as if I wore gloves stuffed with meat. The world tilted toward a height I no longer owned. Then the breath broke, and I was only Sami of this year on his heels behind a cartwheel, nose wet, eyes full of sparks, flies arguing about my ankles. I laughed once without sound, almost as a teacher with bad teeth. It bites and leaves a map. Night watch came. I walked the sector and did not try the flute note again. Tools need rest between insults. I counted shapes, reported quiet, slept after with my knife wrap under the palm like a promise to tomorrow's smaller door. Before sleep fully took me, I whispered the old lines so the scab between my eyes would not become a crown. Never perform, never confess, never trust gratitude forever. Keep the chain secret, even from the parts of me that wanted a child-shaped key, just to prove the wall would open. Then I slept as one, and under sleep the outlines waited without footprints, patient as empty columns, ready for ink I had not yet learned how to spend. The third day of trying made a fool of haste. Haste is a cousin of theatre, and theatre is how tools become temples. I refused both, and still failed like a man knocking on stone with bread. We walked a long gravel braid between low walls. The master wanted speed before a reported toll thickened. Speed makes everyone honest about their lungs and dishonest about their fear. I used the honesty. Same age pulse under cloak at a bend where scrub hid ankles. Birth. Scout 20 paces up trail. Shadow held the line. Clean link. Soft static like sand in oil when a cart creaked between us. Real before grit became fork. Nose dry enough. The old craft still answered when asked in its mother tongue. Age craft kept its mouth shut. At a noon halt, I sat with my back to a wheel and rebuilt the cracked jar day in finer grain. Not only ear heat and knuckle size, the grit under small knees, the exact weight of an empty clay lip against a child's collarbone, the way adult voices arrived from above like weather you cannot argue with. I invited that year to stand. The net hummed flute thin. My stomach flipped as if the ground had moved closer. For a blink, I saw the master's sandals huge as boats, Then the hum snapped and left a headache behind my eyes, shaped like a question mark made of wire. Kell offered water. "You look seasick on dirt," he said. "Dust in the skull," I said. "Makes waves." He almost smiled and did not ask further. Good man, good thread. I drank and hated how much I wanted to tell him the true shape of the failure. Confession is a warm meal. Warm meals on this road come with knives under the bowl. Afternoon brought a roadside seller of dates and rumors. He spoke of a compound town called Net of Sticks by people who disliked it. True name longer, and owned by a client king cousin who collected debts the way spiders collect wings. Boards at the gate, ink that outlived excuses, a drain mouth under the east wall where children sometimes crawled for dropped coin and came out richer or not at all. He laughed. Listeners laughed. I did not. I bought dates I did not want so my face would have a reason to stay near his mouth. Drain mouth, child width, coin and not at all. I filed it beside Kell's board story and Counter's patient absence. Weather builds from separate clouds. That evening the master posted me on early watch, which is worse for private work because early watch still has eyes half awake in bedrolls. I walked, I counted, I did nothing clever. Clever wants applause from the dark. I gave the dark boredom. Later, latrine hour again, I changed the approach. If memory was a doorway, maybe the body needed a physical rhyme. I knelt. I made my shoulders round. I put my palms in the dust, the way small palms find balance. I whispered no words, only the feel of being shorter than a mule's belly and sure the world was made of knees. The flute notes swelled. Something tore soft inside the fold under my sternum. Not pain exactly, more like a page pulled from a bound set without asking the binding. Heat ran down my arms. The night air touched my face from a different height. I looked at my hands. They were mine and not, smaller. Dirt already in the creases as if the year had arrived wearing its own history. The tunic hung on me like a tent on a stick. The rope belt had become a joke trying to be a circle. My heart hammered in a thinner cage. I was still behind the cart line's private stink, still unseen, still linked. The mine net held, but the tone was wrong in a way that made my teeth hurt. Adult thought crammed into a narrower skull without losing the adult, a double exposure of will. Static rose at once, not from distance but from mismatch, sand becoming gravel in the oil. I tried to stand and nearly fell because the ground was farther than my new legs expected in reverse. No, closer, the arithmetic of stride broken. I caught the wheel rim with small fingers and felt bark rough wood bite harder than it should. Sensation louder, fear cleaner. The adult in the net wanted to catalogue. The child shape wanted to run from the smell. "Reel," I ordered, and the craft obeyed with a slap that made both ages scream into one nosebleed. I sat as this year's Sami again, tunic correct, hands large, belt sensible, blood on my lip, flies delighted. My ears rang. For a few breaths I could not remember whether I had succeeded or hallucinated a fever. Then I saw the dust prints near my knees, smaller oval pressures inside my own larger kneel marks, a brief second stance erased by no wind. Proof. Ugly, short, expensive proof. I smeared the small prints with my palm until the ground told only one story again. Then I breathed until the gravel static left my thoughts. Mind static if too many far copies, the law had said. It had not mentioned too many years in one net. The craft was teaching by bruise. Kell's voice called softly from the ring, looking for a body to share leftover onion. I answered in my proper throat and walked back as one boy with a private earthquake cooling under his ribs. I ate onion and lied with my posture, calm, dull, present. Inside, the page that had been pulled tried to slide back into the binding and did not sit flush. Archive body is a strategic vulnerability, I understood then without a teacher. What you can pull out can be torn. What is torn might not return clean. Before sleep, I checked the coin seam, the knife wrap, the fold. Somewhere south, a drain mouth waited under a wall with a board of names. Somewhere behind, Counter rewrote ledgers. Between them stood a boy who had just learned that years can open if you kneel correctly and close if you bleed correctly, and that both motions cost more than a same-age twin ever dreamed of charging. I did not try again that night. The age that stays had shown a hinge. Hinges break if you swing them for joy. I slept as one, and let the outlines under sleep rearrange themselves around a new dangerous column of ink. Morning light does not care what you pulled from your own years in the dark. It puts copper on the jars and asks your hands to be the size they are. Mine were. The small prints were gone. The headache remained like a tenant who pays in noise. We rolled south. I kept rear rope and used the rhythm of heels to rebuild what had happened without romantic paint. Kneel, round the shoulders, invite a lived day, not a vague childhood. Page pull under the sternum, birth into smaller wrist, static from mismatch, not miles. Short window, reel before the child fear and adult catalogue split the will into two drivers fighting one cart. Limits with teeth. Good. Teeth mean the tool is real. At a dry cistern stop, the master sent 3 of us to haul skins. The path dipped behind thorn where the caravan's eyes thinned. I let the other 2 go ahead, arguing about a dice debt. Alone for 30 breaths, I tried the hinge again with cleaner manners. I chose a milder memory, not the cuff, the day I learned to tie a simple knot on a goat line. Tongue between teeth, world close, pride huge over a small success. I knelt. I invited. The page slid with less tear. Smaller wrists, tunic tent, rope belt joke. The net held a cleaner flute tone. Still wrong compared to twin split. Better than gravel. I crawled 3 body lengths under thorn, heart loud, sensation sharp, and peered at the cistern path from a height that made adult sandals into landmarks. Scout work. The point of a child's self was not to fight grown knives. It was to fit where grown shoulders confess themselves. I reeled before the 30 breaths ended. Slap. Nose wet. This year hands on knees. Thorn scratches on my cheek that had not been there. Transferred somehow as tax or as proof that archive flesh is flesh. I smeared blood into dust and caught up to the dice argument with a skin full of black water and a face arranged into boredom. Kell frowned at the scratch when I passed. Thorn, I said. He nodded. Thorns he understood. He did not ask why my belt knot looked freshly fought. I fixed it while walking. Practice became a private curriculum hidden inside chores. Latrine hour. Kneel, birth, 10 counts, reel. Night watch end, kneel behind a scrub screen. Birth, listen to camp from low at air, reel. Each time the static taught me range. Too long in the smaller wrist, and adult thought began to fray at the edges, words losing their handles, fear gaining votes. Too far from the prime body, and the flute tone filled with mud. Near is clear, young is loud. Both together are a narrow bridge. On the 5th practice, my child self found a beetle, and the adult net almost laughed out loud through a small mouth. I reeled hard, scared of joy more than pain. Joy wants company. Company braids stories. The master noticed nothing except that I flinched usefully when shouted at and hauled without speeches. Being underestimated is a thick cloak. I wore it until it stank of honesty. A traveller with a lame donkey shared our fire that night and paid in talk. Net of sticks was real enough under a prettier name, he said. Gate boards, debt pens, a keeper who liked order more than mercy. Levy men sometimes bought names off the boards when Rome's taller lists sent hunger inland. He mentioned a quiet buyer who asked not only for names, but for descriptions of faces that seemed to repeat. Doubled faces, twin rumours. The traveller chuckled and tapped his temple. Road fever, he said. Men see copies when they drink bad water. My stomach did a small cold turn that had nothing to do with water. Counters calm could wear new ink, or something worse could smell the same spice. Either way, the soft cliff of lists was growing stones. Kell listened too, eyes flat. Boards are for people who stay, he muttered later. We are road. Road is harder to nail. Sometimes, I said. He looked at me as if he heard the unsaid and chose dust again. We checked straps that did not need checking. Friendship can be a pair of hands on leather refusing to become a confession. Before sleep, I wrote no notes. Notes are corpses of secrets waiting to be found. I wrote on the underside of thought only. Child self scout, short windows, near prime, mild memories for cleanup pages. No joy performances, no same space stacking of ages where a witness breathes. If archive flesh takes a real wound, Learn where the prime pays. That last line tasted like iron. I did not yet have the answer. I needed the answer before a drain mouth or a depth pen made the question for me. I pulsed same age hand width once, a comfort note, then reeled. Twin craft still home, age craft still a guest with muddy sandals. Both lived under one law: never perform, never confess. Stock ages without becoming a story about ages. I slept and did not dream of outlines. I dreamed of a smaller wrist turning a latch I could not see, and woke with my own fingers flexed as if they had already practiced the turn in a dark that belonged to tomorrow. After the 5th practice, I changed the memory key on purpose, testing whether archive required one golden day or any true day spent in smaller bone. I chose the afternoon I learned to carry a water skin without dragging it, hip bruised by clay, pride ridiculous over not spilling. The page slid. Child self stood. The net tone shifted a shade. Same family of flute, different song. So the archive was a shelf, not a single book. That mattered. Shelves can be browsed. Browsed shelves can be missed if you grab wrong in a hurry. I reeled and sat with that knowledge until the dice-debt men finished their argument and noticed I had been gone a little long. I lifted the skin, complained about cistern leaf scum, and walked with them. Cover tax paid in grumble. That night by the fire, I watched a toddler from a family camped near ours chase a moth into unsafe dark and be scooped by a mother who cursed with love. My flute note stirred like a dog hearing a whistle meant for other dogs. I crushed it. Other people's children are not costumes. Archive is only the years that were already mine. That line felt clean enough to keep forever. Before sleep, I checked Kell's breathing across the ring the way you check a fragile jar in straw. Still one friend, still a thread, still a reason to learn keys that fit throats walls build for refuse and small thieves. I slept as this year only, and under the ribs the shelf of spent days waited without knocking. The scrub south of the gravel braid was honest about its thorns and dishonest about its paths. Paths appeared as animal suggestions and vanished into goat opinions. Perfect country for a lesson that must not have an audience. The master ordered a half-day halt to repack straw around a jar that had begun to sweat oil through a hairline sin. Repacking means hands and curses and the kind of attention that stays in a circle. I volunteered for brush gathering beyond the ring, the dull martyr chore. No one fought me for it. Out past the first thorn wall, I set my gathering cloth down as if it were a claim stake and worked the curriculum. Kneel. Mild memory. Not on goat line. Tongue between teeth, page pull, smaller wrist. The world dropped toward my face. Scrub became forest. Sky became a wider mouth. I moved on hands and knees because standing in a tunic tent made me look like laundry haunted by a child, and even scrub has eyes if birds count. Birds counted. I did not care. Birds do not keep boards. I scouted a loop around our camp at child height. Saw the underbelly of carts, the way rope coils hung within small reach, the gap under the master's sleeping frame where a person of my true year could never slide without a story. Saw Kell's heels at the straw circle, restless, the bruise still a map when his sleeve rode up. Saw a drover hide a skin of something stronger than water behind a wheel and glance around with the guilt of small crimes. Information without theatre, the point. Static rose sooner than I liked. Adult catalogue wanted to map everything. Child body wanted shade and the end of thorn bite. I reeled at a count of 40, slapped back into proper height beside my cloth, and spent 5 breaths tasting iron and dust until the double exposure left my tongue. Then I gathered real brush like an honest boy so the chore would pay its cover tax. Second loop after more sticks. This time I tried leaving the child self in scrub while prime me stood and stacked wood in sight of camp's outer picket, half-turned, face dull. Distance short, maybe 30 paces of thorn. The flute tone muddied at once. Not the far copy gravel of same age stretch. Something stranger, like hearing your own younger voice shout through water while you speak adult orders. I had the child crawl to a white stone and stop. I felt the stone's heat on small palms as a delayed sting on large ones. Lag, age lag, bandwidth tax. I reeled before the lag became 2 wills voting. Nose wet, picket man glanced. I wiped and cursed thorns loud enough to be ordinary. He looked away. Ordinary is a spell if you cast it before questions harden. Third try, I learned a wound answer I did not want and needed. Child self put a knee on a nasty spine and tore skin. Pain bright, clean, huge in the small frame. Prime knee flared in sympathy, not full tear, a ghost laceration under unbroken skin, enough to buckle my stack of brush and make me hiss. I reeled shaking, checked prime knee, reddened, whole, checked the memory of child knee. Archive flesh had taken the real cut. When the page slid home, the cut did not print fully on me, only the echo. The craft had spent some private blood into nowhere I could bandage. Archive vulnerability, not theory, ledger entry in meat. I sat until my hands stopped arguing with the air. Then I finished the brush pile high enough to look like virtue and carried it in. Kell met me near the ring and took half the load without asking. "You smell like fear sweat," he said quietly. "Thorns have opinions," I said. He accepted that and still walked closer than friendship required for the next hour. A human shade. I let him. Threads pull both ways. Afternoon repack ended. We rolled a short stretch to a cleaner camp shelf before dark. I took late watch and did not birth anything. The scrub lesson needed sleep to settle into law. New lines wrote themselves under the old ones. Child self for spaces, not fights. Short leash. Prime in sight of ordinary work when possible. Expect lag if ages split across even small distance. Expect real injury to land on archive flesh and echo into prime. If archive flesh dies, do not learn that answer in public. Cut free if the craft allows. If it does not allow, never send the page where death is cheap. That last cluster made my mouth dry. I drank warm skin water and watched stars ignore my curriculum. A dust smudge moved far east and became a pair of riders who did not turn toward our fires. Absence again, mercy or aim. I reported quiet to the next watch and lay down with my knife wrap under my palm. Kell's whisper found me once in the dark. "If boards take names in the next town," he said, "do not buy mine back with anything that makes priests. I would rather carry debt than carry a legend that eats you." "You will carry neither if I can help it," I said. "That is a soft promise," he said. "Soft promises are the only kind that fit under one boy's tongue," I said. He snorted, almost a laugh, and sleep took him before it took me. I lay awake long enough to feel the smaller wrist inside the larger one, like a nested tool, waiting, costly, real. The age that stays had left the wall and entered the scrub. Tomorrow the road would ask what I intended to do with a key shaped like a year I had already spent. I marched the curriculum on no bark and no scrap, memory only. 3 loops taught fit, lag, and wound echo. A 4th loop would have been vanity. Vanity is how scrapes become stories. I carried brush until my prime shoulders burned with honest work, and let that burn explain any oddity in my gait. On the walk back toward camp after the last reel, I passed a place where 2 animal paths crossed and felt, absurdly, like a border officer of my own skin. Same age craft on one side of the road, age craft on the other. Both under one law, both hungry, neither allowed to elect a public face. Kell took half the load and said nothing more about fear sweat. Sometimes friendship is the decision not to dig a good hole deeper. I owed him that decision many times over already. The scrub had only increased the debt in a currency he could not yet name, and I would not yet mint for him. Mind static is not a poem. It is sand in the thinking oil, then grit, then gravel, then a fork where one will tries to drive 2 carts and both carts hate the road. I had met it on same age stretch when Scout and Shadow stood too far apart in the dark. Agecraft invented a cousin of that tax and charged interest. The day after scrub lessons, the caravan pushed hard toward the town the traveller had spiced with boards and drain mouths. Heat made tempers thin. The master wanted us inside walls before night fees doubled. Speed is a kind of fear with better posture. I tested the net while walking. Tiny pulses, no births, only the way a man checks a tooth with his tongue. Twin note answered clean under the sternum. Flute note answered when I brushed the goat knot memory, eager as a dog that has learned its name. Eager is dangerous. I kept both notes quiet and hold. At a forced short rest, I made a mistake on purpose because unpaid questions become ambushes. Behind a screen of stacked packs, I birthed child self and left him seated, hidden, while prime me walked 50 paces to the waterskin pile and back. Lag hit at 30. By 45, the child's fear of being alone under canvas smell began to vote against my adult errand. Words in my head slipped. I called a mule a jar in my own mind. I reeled hard, staggered, and sat on a jar that was thankfully empty enough not to sing. Blood from both nostrils this time. Static's louder in voice. Kell appeared as if summoned by the smell of iron. "Sit," he said. "Drink. If you faint, the master will invent a story about wine." I drank. The fork in the wheel slowly became one handle again. "You are practicing something stupid," Kell said. "Not a question." "I am practicing staying alive," I said. "Those can be the same road or opposite roads," he said. "Pick with your eyes open." He left before gratitude could become a speech. I loved him for the leaving as much as for the water. Lesson carved deeper. Age split plus distance is a narrower bridge than same-age distance. The child page carries simpler weather. Simple weather floods adult plans if the leash lengthens. Keep child near or keep child brief. Preferably both. We came in sight of the town near late light. It was not a city. It was a clot of walls around a storehouse heart. Gate sticks tall. A board under an awning where a man with stained fingers sat like a spider who had learned letters. Net of sticks, the road name, fit better than whatever pretty word the client king cousin preferred. Smoke rose. Dogs argued. Somewhere a hammer told iron what shape to take. Our master paid gate coin and answered questions about oil and destinations. A board spear counted mules and ignored boys. I loved him for his boredom until the bored man's eyes lifted and did a slow travel across our line. Not Counter's face. Younger. Hungrier in a Clark way. His gaze snagged on thin backs the way hooks snag cloth. Then he wrote nothing and looked back at his board, which was worse than writing. Memory can be a private ink. We nested in a yard that smelled of Chandler pitch and goat. The master warned us not to wander, not to gamble, not to insult men with keys. Keys were religion here. Debt pens sat behind the storehouse wall. He had heard, and the keeper bought peace from local spears with orderly cruelty. I took a load of empties where ordered and mapped without looking like a map. East wall lower, drain grate half hidden by weed, bars spaced for refuse and for a body that remembered being ate. Guard walk on the south, lamp hooks waiting for night, board awning in sight of the gate, not of the drain. Ordinary boys would not notice. I noticed because my curriculum had already paid in noseblood for the right to notice. Evening onion found us. Kell ate like a man trying to make a future out of broth. I ate like a boy keeping a tool quiet. Around us hirelings talked of wages and women and a name hunter said to be moving inland from a coastal office, paying for stories of repeated faces and impossible twins. They laughed. One man said his cousin saw double after bad beer. Another said Rome likes any excuse to put marks on local boards. Laughter sanded fear into entertainment. I did not laugh enough. I corrected by laughing once too loud at a stupid goat joke. Calibration. Always calibration. After food, the master posted watches on our yard gate only. Town watch belonged to the keeper's arrangement. That arrangement felt like a mouth with too many teeth behind a smile. Latrine corner of the yard gave me 10 private breaths. I did not birth. I only touched the flute note and let it go. The smaller wrist flexed inside the larger. Ready. Costly. The static between ages waited like a toll on a bridge I would have to cross if the bored man's hunger ever found a name I cared about. Kell joined me without onion this time. If they call names tomorrow, he said, mine might be dirty. I ran a tab in a place like this 2 seasons ago and left before the ink dried kind. I was stupid and young and sure roads erase numbers. Roads erase feet, I said. Numbers have longer legs. He grimaced. Then do not be a miracle if the legs arrive. Be a thief in the ordinary way. Steal me with boredom if you can. I can try, I said. Trying is the only religion I like on your face, he said, and bumped my shoulder with his, careful of old maps of pain. Night thickened over net of sticks. Dogs calmed. Hammers slept. The board under the awning gathered dark like a second inventory. I slept in snatches with my knife wrap under my palm and the law under my tongue, and between snatches I felt the flute and the twin note and the gravel waiting, 3 taxes for one boy who insisted on remaining one in every mouth that mattered. I reviewed the fork while onion cooled in my bowl. Same age static is distance gravel. Age static is mismatch weather plus distance gravel. Combined, they make a storm in a cup. Rules followed. Keep child near, keep child brief. Never argue politics with a page that thinks in simpler fear. If prime must stand in account, child must already be reeled or never born. Stacking ages in one eyeline is how cults get born from accidents. The bored man's private ink memory sat in my mind beside Counter's calm. Different men, same species of appetite. Net of Sticks was not only a town, it was a preview of every place that believes writing a name is the same as owning a lung. I finished the onion, washed the bowl with a finger, and practiced the face of a boy who finds boards boring. Dawn in Net of Sticks smelled of pitch, bread, and the sour pride of walls that believe they invent order. Our yard woke to the master's curses and a local boy selling water at prices that insulted rivers. I paid for a cup I did not need, so I could stand near the gate line and watch the bored man set out his tools like a priest laying knives. Sticks tall enough to hold awning cloth, board pale with old scrapes and new ink, names in columns. Some names crossed through with a line that looked like mercy and meant sold, paid, or dead. The bored man's stained fingers moved with the calm of someone who has never been a name on the wrong side of his own wood. I kept my face dull and my cup busy. Dull is harder in towns. Towns invent eyes out of boredom. The master sent me and Kell with a chandler's token to fetch rope and pitch plugs from a shop deeper in the clot of streets. Errand stock. Perfect cover. We walked. The streets narrowed and widened without honesty. A shrine niche held a clay figure with a chipped face and a bowl of grain the birds were winning. 2 spears leaned outside a door where someone important slept late. A woman emptied grey water and did not apologize to our ankles. Kell's shoulders climbed toward his ears as we passed a sod mouth that breathed cool air and straw stink. Debt pens, his body said without words. I did not look long. Looking is invitation. In the shop, a fat man with honest sweat sold us rope that would fail in a year and plugs that might last a month. He talked while he took coin. Keeper's men had taken 3 last night for old tabs, he said. 1 cried. 2 tried to bargain with cousins who did not arrive. Levy runner from the coast was due in a few days to buy strong backs off the board if the ink matched a list. Also, lower, as if pitch could hear, a quiet man had been asking shopkeepers about boys who seemed to be in 2 doorways at once. Name hunter talk. Pay for sightings, pay more for a court double. I laughed the way you laugh at ghost stories when you are the ghost's landlord. Kell did not laugh. The fat man shrugged and added a free frayed end of rope for luck. Luck is a word sellers use when they want you to leave pleased with a bad deal. We walked back slower. Kell spoke once. If my name is there, do not read it out loud, he said. Reading makes ink heavier. If it is there, I said, we will treat it like weather. Cloak, not prayer. He nodded, unconvinced, loyal anyway. At the yard, the master inspected robe and cursed its future and accepted it because schedules own him more than standards. He put us on jar watch while he argued fees with a local who smiled with too much gum. Jar watch is standing near clay, trying to look like a threat. I stood. I mapped the east wall again from this angle. Drain grate, weed, shadow under the walk. A child could enter. An adult would become a story of stuck shoulders and spears. Noon heat thickened. The bored man called names once. A short list, voices of debt answering or not. None were Kell. None were Sami. My lungs loosened a notch and tightened again on principle. Absence today is not absence tomorrow. A runner with a sash fragment and dusty sandals arrived at the gate and spoke with the bored man. Coin showed its edge and hid. The runner's eyes did a professional travel across our yard, paused on me, paused on Kell, moved on. Not counter. Different jaw, same species of calm. I filed the jaw. Kell whispered, that one buys for someone who counts for someone taller. Then we count as oil boys, I whispered back. Nothing taller than a jar. He almost smiled. The almost died when the runner left, and the bored man wrote 3 fresh lines with a flourish that made my teeth itch. Afternoon chores blurred. I found 10 breaths behind the empty stack and did not birth. Town air is full of accidental witnesses. I only checked the twin note and the flute note like a man counting hidden coins with his mind. Both present, both expensive. Near evening, a girl no older than my archive wrist chased a hoop past our gate and was shouted off by a spear who had opinions about play. She stuck her tongue out when his back turned and vanished toward the east weed line as if she knew the drain's secret grammar. I watched her path and felt the curriculum click against the map. The town had already trained its children in the cracks. I would only be borrowing a language it taught. Kell saw my gaze. "Do not," he said softly. "Do not what?" I said. "Whatever your eyes just promised the wall," he said. "Walls hear promises and charge rent." I looked away first. He was right in the way friends are right when they smell your worst idea forming. Worst ideas are sometimes the only ideas that fit the arithmetic. Night fees and yard gate watch returned. Dogs took up their arguments. The board gathered dark. Somewhere behind storehouse stone, debt pens clicked with chain or rope or only with the sound fear makes when it invents hardware. I ate lentils that tasted of pitch smoke and rehearsed dullness for a tomorrow that might call a name I could not treat as spice. Before sleep, Kell set his bedroll closer again. 1, he said, meaning the old stacked rock night, meaning the law he had agreed to speak aloud if asked. 1, I answered, and meant a harder thing. 1 plan, 1 rescue road, 1 boy in every public count. Even if under the count a smaller wrist would have to turn a latch the town believed only children and rats owned. Before sleep, I walked the yard once as if checking straps on the nightline. East weed, south lamps, gate board under cloth shadow, drain grammar waiting. I did not approach the grate. I let my feet learn the distances so that later, in a smaller year, the body would already know the map. Maps drawn in adult strides still help child steps. That was a practical mercy in a night short on mercies. Kell's bedroll edge touched the dust near mine. Not quite contact, a negotiable border. 1, he had said. 1, I had answered. The town of tall sticks would try to make that number a joke tomorrow. I intended to answer with arithmetic the board could not column. They called him at second heat, when the yard smelled of hot pitch and men are too busy sweating to stage a proper defense. The boardman's voice did not shout. It carried the way a knife carries when it is shown, not thrown. Kell of the South Road strings, he said. Tab under patron mark of the dried fig house. 2 seasons standing. Present yourself or be presented. Kell went still beside the jar he was turning. I felt the stillness travel into my own bones like shared cold. The master looked up from a fee tablet with the expression of a man watching weather hit someone else's cart. That name is not on my roll as debt, the master said. He is higher. He hauls. Higher hauls until ink says otherwise, the boardman said, almost polite. Keeper's men will settle the fig house claim. If the boy's friends wish to pay, the column accepts coin before sundown. After sundown, the column accepts body. 2 keeper's men were already in the gate shadow with rope that pretended to be procedure. Not Scar's hate, not Counter's personal calm. Institutional teeth, harder in some ways. Institutions do not get bored of spite. They get paid. Kell looked at me once. Not a plea, a reminder. No priests, no miracles. Ordinary thief, if anything. I stayed dull by force that made my jaw hurt. Appetite offered 3 bodies and a yard full of confusion. Theatre. Story sticks harder than rope. I pressed the fold flat and let my hands hang empty and stupid. They took him without beating because beatings are messy on first collection. Rope on wrists forward, a short lead, walk through the gate toward the storehouse mouth. Kell did not struggle. Struggling writes extra lines. A drover cursed softly. The master spat and told the rest of us that anyone else with secret tabs could walk into the sun now and spare him surprises. No one walked. Secret sat down harder in several throats. I stepped forward half a pace with a question shaped like coin. How much to clear the fig column, I said, voice low, the voice of a boy who has 1 merchant circle sewn in a seam and should not admit it. The boardman named a number that made the merchant coin into a joke. Fig houses invent interest the way spiders invent thread. Sundown, he repeated, and turned his stained fingers back to Yud as if we had become unwritten. The keeper's men and Kell vanished into the storehouse cut. Chain sound or Fear's hardware followed. The yard resumed its work because yards must. The master put me on double jar duty and said if I chased debt romances, he would sell my back to the same board to recover rope costs. I nodded like a cowed hire and stacked clay until my arms shook. Inside the shake, arithmetic ran cold and clear. Coin would not free Kell by sundown. Master would not free him. Spears would not free him for free. Storming walls as two adult Sami would free him into a legend that would kill both of us on every road after. Same-age bait tricks needed scrub and night and hunters who feared mess more than paperwork. This was paperwork with keys, drain mouth, child width, archive wrist. The plan arrived fully dressed and ugly. I hated it and loved it the way you hate and love a knife that fits your palm too well. Afternoon crawled. I ran a real errand for Pitch to keep the master's eye bored with me. In the street, I passed the east weed line and did not stop. Stopping is a confession of intent. I counted steps from weed to grate in my side vision. 14. Guard walk above, shadow timing linked to the hammer that had woken again in some smith's throat. Hammer beats as clock. Good. At the shop, the fat man already knew. Your friend with the bruise map, he said. Fig tab. Keeper likes fig tabs. They pay in labor, if not in silver. Labor goes to the coast sometimes when the sash runner comes. Your friend has maybe 2 days of pen before he becomes a line on a moving list. 2 days, I said. Or 1, if the runner is early, he said, and sold me plugs with less talk than before, which is how kindness looks on busy men. Back in the yard, I found the master and made myself useful until usefulness became invisibility. Invisibility is not a power. It is a schedule of not being interesting. I repaired a strap. I hauled water. I laughed once at a goat joke with the correct delay. Between tasks, I touched the flute note under my sternum and felt the smaller wrist flex like a key teeth side out. Kell's silence from behind stone was a pressure. He had asked not to be the reason a story got a priest. I intended to steal him with a method that left no priestly shape in any witness mouth. If I failed, I would fail as a stupid boy near a drain, not as a doubled miracle on a wall. Near last light, the board man called the fund-down column for payments. No one paid for Kell. The stained fingers drew a short horizontal line that was not crossing out, only moving a name into a deeper shelf of ink. I watched from jar shadow and memorized the motion. Ledgers are enemies that teach you their dance if you refuse to blink. Night came with dogs and lamps on the south walk. East wall stayed darker, weed-owned, great half forgotten by men who believed adults were the only thieves worth designing against. They were mostly right. Mostly is a door. I told the early watch I would take latrine and water skins to the yard cistern corner. He waved me off, eyes on the gate. I moved with skins and the posture of chores. Behind the empty stack, I set the skins down, knelt in pitch smell and goat dust, and invited the goat knot day with a calm I did not feel. Page pull, smaller wrist, tunic tent, flute tone clean enough. The H that stays stood up inside the town of tall sticks, and the Claim On Kell became, for a narrow window, a problem sized for a child who knew locks from below. 14 steps through weed at child height is a different country than 14 steps with adult knees. Stems slap face. Dirt climbs wrists. The grate arrives like a mouth with iron teeth spaced by men who imagined refuse, not rescue. I left prime me seated in the empty shadow with a water skin in large hands and a face arranged towards sleep, the picture of a tired hire stealing a sit. Link short, leash tight, flute tone already tasting mud at the edges because fear votes early in a smaller cage. Child self reached the grate, bars cold, gap enough if shoulders turn diagonal and breath goes thin. I turned, I went thin. Iron kissed archive ribs and let me pass with a tax of scrapes. Inside, the drain throat sloped under wall foot into a black that smelled of old water, rat decisions, and grain dust from the storehouse above. Static hummed. Prime me's adult ears in the yard heard a dog change its mind about barking. I held both pictures. Yard lamp glow on large eyelids, drain dark on small palms. Double exposure. Do not fork, crawl. The throat opened into a shallow culvert running along the inner east footing. Above, stone. Sideways, a cracked service slot where sacks had once been hooked up from cart level, now mostly mortared, one rectangle left loose by laziness or by children's long tutoring. I pushed the loose rectangle with small hands. It gave like a secret that wanted exercise. I entered a undercroft of the storehouse, low beams, barrel bellies, the sweet sour of oil and figs and debt. Voices farther in, keepers playing bones with boredom. A lamp's leak of light showed a pen lattice of wood and rope where 3 shapes sat. One shape had Kell's bruise map when he turned his face into the leak. Relief is a loud thing. I crushed it before it could travel up the net and twitch Prime Me's mouth into a smile in the yard. Child Self stayed in barrel shadow, mapped. One keeper near the bones game, one half dozing by a door that led toward the gate cut. No counter, no sash runner yet. Rope on Kell's wrists forward, looped to a ring in the floor stone. The other 2 debtors slept or pretended. A water bucket, a latrine pot, ordinary cruelty. I needed the ring pin or the rope knot, not a heroic cut in lamplight. Knots I understood from goat lines and the memory that had opened this page. I waited for the bones game to spike in argument over a throw. Men lean in when pride is touched. They lean away from shadows. Argument came, I slid. Small fingers on Kell's rope where the knot fattened near the ring. Kell flinched and looked down. He saw a child with my curls and my 2 familiar eyes in a face not yet cut by this year's scab patterns. His mouth opened. I shook my small head once, hard, the adult net slamming a command through a flute throat. Silence. He closed his mouth. His eyes stacked impossible things and chose, for love or for the old promise, to shut up. Good man. Good thread. Fraying. The knot fought me. Child hands are clever and weak. I used the weak cleverness, needle patience, the way I had teased goat lying years ago while someone tall waited without mercy. The fat loop loosened. Not free yet. Enough to work the ring pin sideways play. The pin was iron with a bent head. I walked it with both palms, tiny motions, sweat making salt in archive eyes. Bones' voices rose. A keeper cursed a cheater. I froze. Prime Me in the yard almost stood. I forced Prime still. Link gravel. Hold. Pin lifted a finger's width. I fed rope slack through. Kell understood and made his body slack too, helping without looking like help. The loop opened. His hands came free under cover of his own knees. I left the rope arranged around the ring like a snake still sleeping, a lie for the first glance. Now exit, not through the door of spears, back through child throat. I tugged once on his sleeve toward the loose rectangle. He stared, then crawled, adult shoulders hating the low beams. At the slot, he nearly stuck. I pushed from behind with small panic strength. Static roared. He scraped through into culvert dark with a sound too loud in my child ears. I followed, pulled the rectangle mostly home, and led him on hands and knees toward the great mouth. Behind us, a laugh from the bones game. No alarm yet. Alarm would come when a glance became a count. At the grate, Kell's adult frame was a problem the designers had almost solved correctly. He forced a shoulder, cursed without voice, lost skin, and spilled into weed on the outer side like a birth the wall did not want. Child Self came after, iron kissing ribs again. We lay in weed stink for 2 breaths. I pointed him not to the yard gate, but along the outer east shadow toward a refuge ditch that drained toward the low orchards outside town logic. He nodded, eyes still full of stacked ears, and moved as quiet as a bruised man can. Child Self scrambled 14 steps back toward the empty stack where Prime sat. Reel, page slam, slap. I became one height with blood on my lip, scrapes on ribs echoing, water skin fallen against my ankle. The flute tone died into twin silence. For a moment I could not remember if Kell was free or if I had only dreamed a smaller wrist turning rope. Then I heard a distant shout inside the storehouse, the sound of a sleeping snake found missing. Alarm beginning its career. I stood with the skins, wiped my mouth, and walked toward the yard cistern as if chores still owned me. Behind my dull face, the rescue was only half paid. Extraction without a name still needed daylight to miscount us, and the archive page had left skin on iron teeth that no bandage on this year flesh could fully explain. In the yard cistern light, I let my hands shake once where no one stood close enough to own the shake. Then I stopped them. Shaking is true and also a story. I chose the next true thing. Skins filled, face dull, ears open for the career of alarm. Kell was in weed dark with free wrists and a mind on fire. I was in lamp logic with a bloody lip and a count to keep. 2 ages had done their work. One plan still had night left to survive. I walked back toward the jars like a boy returning from water, which was, in the only way the yard was allowed to know, exactly what I was. Alarm is a weather that starts in one mouth and becomes a town. I heard it thicken behind storehouse stone while I poured cistern water like a boy who had never met a grate. Keepers shouted counts, a horn coughed, dogs reinvented their job. Our yard gate watch stood taller and suddenly cared about every shadow. The master appeared barefoot with a stick and a theory that debt escapes would be blamed on visiting strings. He ordered us into a tighter cluster near the jars. "Count off," he barked. I made my voice present and ordinary in the role. "Sami, here, 1. Kell was not here. Kell was, if the plan held, in the refuse ditch crawling toward Orchard Dark with rope burns and a mind full of a child who wore my eyes. The plan had always been 2 ages, not 2 adult bodies. Prime in the count, archive in the throat, ally in the weed, no doubled man for the board to sell as miracle meat. A keeper's man with lamp and rage came to our gate and demanded the master's cooperation in a search. Escaped debtor, bruise-faced, road hire, possibly helped, possibly still inside. The master cursed all tabs and opened the yard because closed yards look guilty. Spears and keepers swept under carts, behind empties, into the latrine corner where my smaller knee prints might still have lived if I had not smeared dust with a waterskin's edge on my way back. They found goat pellets and pitch smears, and a boy with a wet lip who said he bit it hauling. They did not find Kell. Good. They also did not leave. One stayed at our gate as if our clay might hatch men. The board man arrived with a cloak over his sleep shirt and ink already in his eyes. He looked at our line the way butchers look at ribs. When his gaze snagged on me, I thought of counter and of the sash runner jaw and of name hunter coin and kept my face as interesting as a jar plug. "Where is the bruised one?" he asked the master. "Take him by your ink at second heat," the master said. "If your pens leak, do not bill my rope." "Pens do not leak without hands," the boardman said. "Hands leave marks. We will find the marks." He left a second man and took his cloak back toward the storehouse. Search noise moved east, toward weed, toward grate. My stomach went cold. Kell needed more minutes than pride wanted to give. Prime me could not run the ditch without becoming the helping hand they wanted to catch. Child self could run messages and snip a pursuit path if I paid static again so soon after a slam. I asked the gate watch for leave to piss beyond the empties, the kind of request that embarrasses men into permission. He grimaced and nodded once. Behind the stack, I knelt in residual fear stink and pulled the page with less mildness than the craft prefers. Memory of the cuff, ear heat, ground close. Tear, birth, smaller wrist, ribs already scraped, archive skin remembering iron. I sent child self not back into the grate, but along the outer base in weed shadow toward the ditch, a short leash of 30 paces, prime-seated, flute tone muddy at once. I felt thorns, felt damp, felt Kell's breathing before I saw him. A scraped adult crouched where refuse water blackened dirt. Keepers' lamps bobbed near the great mouth behind us. They had found the iron kiss marks and the weed crush. Cleverness arriving late. Child self grabbed Kell's sleeve and pulled him farther along the ditch, away from lamp logic, toward a low break in an outer orchard wall, where goats had taught stone to fail. Kell followed on faith that had run out of explanations. At the break, I pushed him through and pointed south of south, not back to our yard, to the scrub shelf where caravans sometimes overflow camp when gates grow teeth. "Wait until the line moves," I tried to say through a child's mouth and managed only a rasp and a point. Adult words fit badly. He understood point better than speech. I turned child self back toward Prime. Lamps were closer. A keeper cursed about children and rats and loose mortar. Static gravel filled the net. I reeled too hard, slammed, bit back a sound, and found myself this year again with both nostrils open and the gate watch calling for the pissing boy to stop dying behind jars. I stumbled into view wiping red, blamed a pitch-reek feint, and accepted a cuff from the master for drama. The cuff helped. Pain is a costume when you need one fast. Searchers came back angry and empty-handed from the first weed pass. They would widen. Widening takes time. Time is a stolen mule. You ride it until it dies. I lay in the cluster after and breathed one plan into stillness. Kell outside, me inside the count. No public too, no child left where lamps could braid curls into my face. If they caught a child-shaped ghost with my eyes, the archive would become a story, and stories become cages with nicer names. 2 ages had opened the wall. One plan still had to close the night without turning into a cult in anyone's mouth. I watched the bored man's cloak move like a darker hole among lamps, and thought of lists taller than this town, and of how a successful secret feels less like triumph and more like holding breath until your vision spots, and then holding longer because the alternative is singing. I used the cuff sting as a metronome while the search noise widened. Sting, breath, dull face. Sting, breath, dull face. Inside the rhythm, I tracked Kell's probable path along the ditch by memory of child sight. Refuse water, orchard break, scrub shelf south of south. If he ran toward town roads, he would meet lamps. If he ran toward our gate, he would meet the bored man's stare. South Scrub was the only stupid place smart enough to work. Prime me could not send another page soon without risking a fork in front of witnesses. I held the net quiet and let time be the mule. Men tire. Spears lean again, boards rewrite and wait for morning ink. Escapes that look like flukes die into shrugs if you do not feed them second miracles. When a keeper demanded undercart checks a second time, I went eager again. Lamp up, voice board. Clear, clear, clear. Boredom is a weapon if you load it before the other man loads his speech. The master watched me with narrowed eyes and saw only a hire trying to get back to sleep schedules. Good. Let him see that. Let everyone see that. The plan's second half was not cleverness. It was the long, dull refusal to look like a key. They found the grate properly on the second pass, which is to say, they found what children and refuse already knew and elevated it into official fear. Iron bars examined by lamp. Scrapes noted. A keeper with shoulders too wide tried the gap and became comedy that no one was allowed to laugh at. Orders went out for a small boy of the town to be fetched as a probe. I heard that order from Jar Shadow and felt the curriculum turn and bite my hand. If they put a living other child into the throat, my route became shared language. Shared language spreads. Also, a probe child might find the undercroft signs of Kell's crawl and my loose rectangle and turn them into testimony. Prime me could not volunteer as probe. Wrong size. Wrong face already half-filed in the bored man's eye. Child self could enter again and muddy the story from inside, but the page was sore, the net thin, the night long. I chose a third road, make the drain mouth look like a rat road that had already finished its crime. When the yard's attention locked on the gate argument between master and a spear over search rights, I slipped to the weed with a broken jar shard and the last private breath I could steal. No birth yet. Adult hands yanked weed into messier crush patterns, tossed a dead rat I was lucky to find near the ditch into the great throat, smeared fig paste from a dropped market scrap along a bar as if small thieves had been its sweets. Ugly work, believable work. Then I risked the page. Kneel, goat knot, pull, smaller wrist screaming quietly with old scrapes. Child self dropped the rat deeper, kicked culvert silt into confusing tides, and dragged the loose rectangle fully askew so it looked like long neglect rather than one night's hinge. I did not go as far as the pen. Lamps were too near above. I reeled after a count of 20, slammed, swallowed blood, and was back among jars before the fetched town boy arrived, rubbing sleep and fear. They lowered the town boy on a rope like a bucket. He cried. He reported rat stink, broken stone, no men. He was pulled up with wet feet and a story that satisfied men who wanted the escape to be a fluke of rope and sleep, not a siege of cleverness. The bored man did not look satisfied. Calm, hungry men rarely do. But spears prefer flukes. Flukes mean they can go back to leaning. The search widened outward along roads and orchards. That was the new knife. Kell in Scrub could be walked into by any lampline with dogs. I needed our caravan to move, and soon, with a reason that was not my face. Near midnight, a different horn sounded from the west road, a caravan horn we knew, another string seeking night nest and finding gate teeth. Confusion is a resource if you spend it. Our master, furious at fees and searches, began shouting about leaving at first grey rather than paying another day of pitch yard rent under suspicion. The board man wanted us held. The spear wanted fewer problems. Coin found a path that was not justice and not mercy. We would be allowed to roll at grey if we submitted to a last count and a look under every cart. I volunteered for undercart duty with a lamp, the eager, stupid helper. Eagerness confuses people who expect you to hide. I looked under boards and called clear in a voice that bored the spear. Clear, clear, clear. When I reached the cart nearest the east edge, I paused long enough to leave nothing and notice everything. No Kell, good. No child prince in oil, good. Count off again. Sami, here, still one. We did not sleep. We packed in dark mutters. The master promised to beat anyone who had ever met a fig. I took the promise as weather. At first grey, the gate opened for us with a spear's shrug and a bored man's stare that tried to nail my back to a future line. I walked rear rope and did not look at the grate. Looking is a second confession. Outside walls, the road smelled like freedom's cheap cousin, dust. We rolled. Search lamps still bobbed in orchard rows far right. I watched them without turning my head. Eyes on mule heels, mind on a scrub shelf south of south. 2 bends later, when town smoke became a smudge behind, a figure rose from a drainage cut and became Kell in ruined tunic, wrists raw, eyes too wide, alive. He timed it like a man joining a line he had only stepped aside from to piss, a road story so ordinary it might live. The master saw him and turned purple. I paid the fig with my feet and came back, Kell began, voice cracked into a laugh that was half lie and half relief. They left a rope soft. I am not proud. I am here. Dock my wage. The master hit him once for theatre and once for fear, and then put him on middle rope where he could be watched and used. The line accepted the story because the line wanted miles more than truth. A drover clapped Kell's shoulder and said debt pens were getting sloppy. Sloppy is a word people love. It keeps the world small. Kell's eyes found mine for a breath. Stacked child, stacked great, stacked silence. He looked away first this time and walked like a man whose legs had agreed to remain in 1 year. I walked behind and felt the drain mouth still around my archive ribs like a ring of cold, and knew the secret rescue had succeeded in the only way that matters on this road. He was breathing in our dust, and no mouth in net of sticks had a clean shape for how. As we rolled, I kept rear rope and watched Kell's back for collapse. He walked like pain and stubbornness had signed a short treaty. The master harangued him about tabs until the words lost edges. I did not intervene. Intervention is a spotlight. Spotlight is how name hunters find meat. My archive ribs ached with iron memory. Each ache was a receipt. I accepted the receipts. The town boy lowered on a rope would go home with wet feet and a story about rats. The board man would hate flukes. The spear would lean. Our line would put bends between itself and tall sticks. That chain of ordinary outcomes was the true extraction engine. The smaller wrist had only turned the first gear. The rest was dust, miles, and lies simple enough to digest. Miles sand secrets if you keep walking like a person with nothing to sand. We put 3 bends and a dry shrine between us and the tall sticks before the master called a water rest. Search dust did not follow as a column. A single rider watched from a ridge and turned back, either bored or reporting. I filed both. Kell sat hard against a wheel and drank as if water were an argument he was finally winning. His wrists needed wrapping. I offered cloth from my own hem without speech. He let me wrap. The bruise map on his face had new scrapes from wall and ditch. He looked like a man beaten by ordinary escape. Ordinary was the costume we both needed him to wear until it became stin again. When the master's attention went to a mule's hoof, Kell spoke without moving his lips much. I saw a child with your eyes, he said. You saw rat dark and fear, I said. Do not, he said, and the word held more plea than anger. I can shut up about rocks that become 2. I can shut up about mule demons. Do not make me shut up about a child who undid my knot with your face, unless you want me to go mad in a tidy way. Then shut up about the knot, I said, soft as cloth on blood. Keep the child as a dream. Dreams are allowed to steal. Boys are not. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the stack was still there, and so was the choice. He nodded once. Dream, he said. Fine. A useful dream. If I ever speak it waking, hit me. I will offer bread instead, I said. He almost laughed and then did not, because laughing hurt some rib the wall had charged him. We sat until the rest ended. Extraction without a name means even the rescued must misfile the method. That cruelty is part of the law. I hated it and kept it. Love that demands confession is how temples get built on living backs. We rolled on. Afternoon heat put shimmer on the road and lies in the distance. I checked the net in tiny pulses. Twin note soar, flute note roar, like a throat after too much shouting. No births. The archive page needed days before another pull if I wanted the hinge to remain a hinge. Vulnerability is not only capture. Vulnerability is using up the years you cannot repurchase with coin. At evening camp, far enough that net of sticks was only a bad taste, the master counted heads and found 18 again, including Kell. He made a speech about tabs and fools and how his string was not a rescue society. We listened like cattle. After food, I took latrine duty and finally looked at my own ribs under tunic. Scrapes transferred as faint ghost lines, not open wounds. Archive had paid the iron kiss more fully. Prime carried memory. The craft's accounting remained unfair and survivable. Good enough. Kell found me after with bread and no jokes. I will not ask how, he said. I will ask what I owe. You owe silence and your wages spent on dull days, I said. Become boring. Boring men are hard to recollect on boards. He nodded. Then lower. The bored man will sell the story of a leaky pen. The sash runner will still want backs. The name hunter, if he is real, will want faces that repeat. My dream makes me a danger to you even shut. Then we walk different sides of the line when eyes are many, I said. Threads can lengthen without cutting. He accepted that the way he accepted half answers with bread. Road friendship, deeper now, still shallow enough to live. I preferred it to blood oaths. Blood oaths are theatre's cousins. Night watch, stars hard. I walked my sector and did not touch the flute note. Appetite wanted to check the child page the way a tongue wants a sore tooth. I refused. Tools remember abuse. Somewhere north, a bored man rewrote a column and hated a rat. Somewhere on a taller road, a hunter of doubled faces counted coin. Between them, one boy with a secret rescue already cooling into camp gossip about sloppy pens. A drover told the story at the fire with improvements. Kell chewed through a rotten rope. Kell swam a ditch. Kell bribed a child of the town with a fig. Laughter. Kell glanced at me when the bribed child entered the tale, and I kept my face polite and empty. Myths that miss the hinge are blessings. Before sleep, I whispered the laws so the scab between my eyes would not crown itself for a job well hidden. Never perform, never confess, never trust gratitude to stay quiet forever. Stock ages. Spend them like coin that can buy life and also buy a leash if the wrong hand sees the spend. Promise of the stretch, paid. Age archive learned in dirt and blood. Ally taken by ink and returned by a method no living public mouth could braid into a clean miracle. Soft cliff ahead. Lists, hunters, the hunger of boards for names and of empires for backs. None of that cancelled the breath in Kell's lungs 10 paces from my bedroll. It only meant breath remains a road, not a throne. I slept as one. Under sleep, the outline stood quieter, the child column no longer empty graffiti. It was a tool with scrapes on it now. Scrape tools still cut if you keep the edge secret and the hand steady and the story always one boy short of the truth. I spent part of late watch teaching my mouth the drover's improved story until I could tell it without flinching at the missing hinge. Kell chewed rotten rope. Kell swam. Kell bribed a town child with a fig. If asked, I would shrug and say I was on jar duty and saw nothing but lamps. True enough to walk, incomplete enough to live. The habit of incomplete truth was becoming my longest muscle. When sleep finally took me, I did not dream of Kell's free wrists. I dreamed of the pin in the floor ring turning under small palms and of the sound it did not make. Silence as craft. Silence as love with armor. Silence as the only wage I would accept from a friend who still had to share roads with boards. Dawn made the escape into something the road could digest. Digestion is underrated. Miracles sit in the stomach like stones. Ordinary escapes pass through and become heat for walking. The master put Kell on middle rope and me on rear, and told both of us that if Fig houses sent riders, he would hand us over tied in a bow of self-preservation. I believed him. Belief keeps you from asking men to be better than their ledgers. Daylight after a secret is harder than night with a key. Night forgives blur. Day asks for edges. I sanded edges with chores. I retied knots that did not need it. I gave dull answers about the town. Fees high, pens ugly, rats bold. When a drover asked how Kell slipped me, I shrugged and said, soft rope and luck and a ditch. 3 mouths around me, one boring lie, repeated until it bred boredom. Boredom is better scrub than denial. Kell played his part with bruised dignity. He complained about wage docking. He laughed once at a joke about keepers counting bones better than prisoners. He did not look at me too often. Surveillance of gratitude loosened into pace matching, a human habit. Good. Near midday, a northbound pair on good sandals asked if we had come through Net of Sticks. Our drover said yes and offered the sloppy pen story as free spice. The pair smiled too carefully. One had stained fingers. Not our boardman, same church of ink. He asked whether any boys in our line had been seen in 2 places, a joke with a hook in it. Men laughed. I laughed on time. The stained man watched throats, not eyes, as if swallows told truth. Then they rode on. My cold stomach filed them under weather that would return as climate. I touched neither twin note nor flute note while they were in sight. Even pulses can change a face. Afternoon brought a low market cluster without full walls, the kind of place that sells water and rumours and fried dough to anyone with copper. The master allowed a short buy. I went for nails. Kell went for cloth to wrap wrists better. We did not walk together. Lengthened thread. At the nail stall, an old woman with a mean mouth spoke to another seller about a name hunter overnighting at a shrine south of here. Pays for doubled faces. Pays for child thieves who look like older thieves. Collects descriptions for a coastal office that might be Roman appetite in local clothing or might be something that only borrows Rome's shadow. She spat when she said it. Spit is a kind of prayer in people who cannot afford temples. I bought nails I half needed and left before my interest became a purchase of its own. On the way back, I saw Kell at the cloth stall being asked by a cheerful man if he was the famous ditch swimmer already. News runs faster than mules when it is small enough to carry in a laugh. Kell shrugged and said fame was a wage dock and a scraped shoulder. The cheerful man lost interest. Cheerful men are safer than stained ones. I still did not join Kell until our yard of dust reclaimed us. We rolled out before evening fees could invent themselves. Camp was a shelf above a thin watercourse where frogs argued with eternity. I took early watch and spent it counting ordinary shapes. When Kell relieved me, he stood close enough to share breath warmth and not closer. Daylight held, he said. No one stacked you. Daylight is a habit, I said. Keep practicing. He handed me leftover dough from the cluster, greasy and kind. I ate it like a sacrament of boredom. Under the eating, I checked my ribs' ghost scrapes and the folds' rawness. Healing, slow. The age that stays had not abandoned me. It had billed me. I would pay in rest and in refusal of joy performances. Night thickened. I slept after watch and dreamed not of milk-light outlines, but of a board with my name written small and Kell's name written beside it, and a third name that was only a child's smudged thumbprint. I woke before the boardman could speak the names aloud, and wiped my face as if sweat were the only ink involved. Second daylight of the count of 1 went cleaner. No careful smiles on the road, no stained fingers. Hills lowered. Somewhere far east a dust smudge might have been counter or might have been goats. I did not chase it with my eyes long enough to teach it my fear. At rest, Kell said quietly, I keep almost thanking you in front of people. Thank the ditch, I said. Thank soft rope. Thank rats. He smiled for real then, brief, and the smile made him look younger than his bruise map. For a blink, I saw why boards like men like him, still enough life left to sell. I looked away first and fixed a strap until the blink passed. Promise held in sunlight, ally breathing, method unnamed. One boy in every mouth that did not own my sternum. The cliff remained soft and full of lists, but soft cliffs are still edges. I walked rear rope with nails in a cloth and a law under my tongue, and let ordinary light do the work of hiding what ordinary light cannot see. I practiced one more daylight discipline after the market cluster, letting Kell walk ahead out of earshot while I watched the road behind, then switching without a signal. Lengthened thread, 2 pairs of eyes, 1 public story. If the name Hunter cut our path, he would find hirelings who did not cling like conspirators. Conspirators look like doubled faces even when they are only 2 friends with a ditch between their histories. At evening frog song, I repaired the knife wrap and found the leather still stained from older chapters. Stains are calendars. I did not scrub this one. I added a new knot, small, ugly, secure. The count of 1 held through 2 suns. I intended to make it a weather system, not a lucky afternoon. Before the second night fully claimed me, I walked to the creek and washed the market grease from my fingers, as if grease could carry names. Water cold, frogs unimpressed. I looked at my face in a black ripple and saw one boy, scab between the eyes, curls dusty, mouth set to dull. No child floated beside him, no twin. The ripple lied less than boards do. I flicked the water with a finger, broke the picture on purpose, and went back to the ring still counted correctly by anyone who cared to look. On the 3rd quiet day after net of sticks, I paid the bill the craft had left on the table. Bills arrive after the meal. The meal had been Kell's breath. The bill was everything the smaller wrist had spent and could not pretend was free. We camped early near a stand of scrub that remembered better years as charcoal ghosts. The master trusted the quiet enough to drink. Men loosened. I took a long latrine walk that was not latrine and sat where thorn made a room without a door. I breathed. I touched the flute note. The page stuck. Not refusal like the first dream war. Soreness. A hinge swollen from too much swing. I invited goat knot mildness. Hume without birth. I invited the cuff day's sharper key. Hume and a spike of static that made my tongue taste brass. No smaller wrists. No tunic tent. The age that stays had not left forever. It had closed for inventory. I sat with that and did not panic like a child refused a toy. Inventory is how tools remain tools. I pulsed twin note instead. Same age hand width, birth, scout 3 paces, clean link, tender, real. Nose dry, twin craft still home, age craft in recovery. The difference mattered. If I had needed a great tonight, arithmetic would have failed. Archive vulnerability, 2nd lesson. Spend creates downtime. Downtime during a hunt is a hole in the floor. Plan spends, bank days. Do not empty the child column for joy or for proof. I looked at my prime ribs where ghost scrapes faded yellow. I pressed them. Dull ache. I wondered, not for the first time, what would have happened if Lamps had caught child self in the culvert and used a knife. Would I have jerked Prime into a scream in the yard? Would the page have died into nowhere and left a missing year in my mind like a pulled tooth? Would the net have forced a choice between cut loose and shared death? I did not have those answers. Needing them before the test remained law. Tonight I wrote a provisional rule in Fort alone. If archive flesh is taken and pain writes my true name on my prime face, cut if the craft allows. If cut fails, end the threat to witnesses first, grief second. Never enter a throat with Lamps already arguing at both ends. Hard rules taste like iron. Iron is honest. Kell's footsteps carefully announced themselves in grit. He sat without asking and offered water. You look like you are counting ghosts, he said. Inventory, I said. Of what, he said. Of debts that are not fig tabs, I said. He accepted the wall of that sentence and drank after me. Silence worked between us better than it had before the pen. Shared crime, even unnamed, is a kind of shade. A mule snorted. Far road empty. He spoke again. If your dream child is hurt when you send it, do you hurt? He asked. Eyes on scrub, not on me? I hurt enough to stop sending it for a while, I said. That is all you get. He nodded. All I want, he said. All I can carry without becoming a priest of you. Good, I said, and meant it hard enough to sting. We walked back separate. At fire, a drover repeated a fresher rumor. The name hunter from the coastal office had left the shrine south and was moving on a path that might cut our road in 2 days if speeds matched. He paid in silver fragments for sightings of repeated faces and for any child thief stories tied to older boys. Our drover laughed and said he would sell his own shadow if the price was right. Men laughed, I laughed. Under the laugh, I felt the swollen hinge and the twin note and the scab between my eyes like a failed star that still wanted to learn constellations. That night, I slept and the outlines returned, not as wall only, as a row of tools on a bench, child tool wrapped in cloth, boy tool oiled, taller tools under dust I had not earned. A hand that might have been the cave's idea of a hand hovered and did not touch. I understood without speech. Earned years open, spent years ache, unlived years stay locked. Immortality as chain of selves would not be a single trick night. It would be a life of stocking and spending in secret. A people of one person growing the slow way. I woke before dawn and checked the fold. Flute note answered faintly, better than brass spike, not ready for iron bars. Twin clean, coin seam cold, knife wrap tight. Kell snored like a saw that had learned hope again. What the archive costs is not only blood on small knees and static between ages. It costs patience. It costs the refusal to become famous for the key you carry. It costs letting friends misfile their gratitude as dreams. I paid those costs in the dark and stood when the master cursed the sun up. One boy still, hinge healing, road turning toward a hunter who wanted exactly the kind of story I had just refused to leave behind in a drain mouth. I walked a slow circle through scrub after Kell left and tested twincraft once more at short range until the tenderness felt like ordinary muscle, not injury. Then I sat and named quietly what I would not do for the next handful of days. No great crawls, no proof births for appetite, no stacking child self near Kell's eyes even in private. Let the dream stay a dream long enough for both our minds to scar closed over it. Far off, a night bird asked a question and answered itself. I stood, brushed dust, and returned to firelight as a boy who had only been moving his bowels and his thoughts, both unremarkable, both finished. The hinge's inventory continued in the dark under my sternum without my hands on it. That, too, was a kind of trust in the tool, to let it heal while I played dull under copper-colored stars. I ended the inventory hour with a final refusal. I did not tell Kell the hinge was swollen. Information is a weight. He already carried a dream heavy enough. If a great appeared tomorrow, I would find another arithmetic or fail in ordinary ways before I pulled a raw page into iron teeth. That decision sat ugly and correct in my chest beside the healing scrapes. Correct decisions often taste like the opposite of glory. I swallowed it anyway and slept as one under a sky that did not care which years I had learned to spend. The road south did not congratulate me for secrecy. It offered ruts, mule droppings, and a sky the color of hammered tin. I took rear rope. Dust stitched my ankles. The caravan became again a slow animal of jars and complaints. Ordinary light forgave what it did not notice. I intended to remain unnoticeable until noticing became a choice I owned. Kell walked middle with wrists under clean cloth and a face learning boredom on purpose. He tossed no stacked glances. When he spoke to me, it was about water and straps and a coast door that might still exist if wages and time ever shook hands. I made small noises in the right places. Thread lengthened without snapping. Good. Behind us, net of sticks cooled into other men's problem of sloppy pens and bold rats. Scar remained a gagged hate somewhere in Client King gift chains. Counter remained an open ledger without a face on this stretch of dirt. Ahead, according to dough sellers and mean-mouthed women and drovers who loved spice, a name hunter moved with silver fragments and a hunger for repeated faces. Census talk travelled with him like dogs at a heel. Boards, columns, breath as property. Rome's taller lists casting short local shadows that still had teeth. Dust of lists. You breathe it before you see the board. At a noon halt, a rider with a neat cloak and no obvious sash stopped to buy water from our master and paid too well. His eyes did the professional travel. He asked mild questions about towns behind and roads ahead. He laughed at the ditch swimmer story when a drover offered it unasked. Then he asked, mild still, whether any in our line had brothers who looked like twins born years apart, or children who appeared on errands too clever for their height. The master spat and said his hirelings were too ugly to come in sets. The rider smiled and rode south faster than a water buyer needs to ride. I watched his dust and felt the swollen flute hinge tick like a second clock. Not ready, not empty, waiting. Kell appeared at my shoulder after the rider shrank. That one collects, he said. Then we give him nothing shaped like a set, I said. He nodded. If he takes me again, he said. Same rule. No priests. Ordinary if you can. Dream if you must. Live either way. Live is the rule under the rules, I said. Evening put copper on different hills. We camped in a bowl where a thin creek argued with stones, cousin to the camp where the second chapter of Forever had closed. I walked the first 100 steps toward water as one silhouette and stopped where eyes could still count me correctly. Not a private departure into seams, not a stage, a boy testing whether the world still accepted the number one. It did. A mule drank. A man repaired a sandal with the concentration of prayer. Ordinary light held. I returned, ate lentils that tasted of smoke and grit, laughed at a stupid joke about a kinglet and a goose so my mouth would match other mouths. The laugh worked the throat muscles. Under it the law held. Split only in shadow, strike only as accident. Live long enough to stock ages. Become inevitable without becoming famous. Spend the age that stays like careful coin. Never let two mouths or two ages tell two different truths where a living witness can braid them into a cult or a cage. Promise paid for this stretch. The years opened, the child self scouted, the ally left a debt pen without a public miracle. The method stayed misfiled as rats and soft rope and dreams. Soft cliff ahead, not a false end. Name hunter dust on the southern tin sky. Census hungers, distance taxis, archive downtime. Counters calm somewhere rewriting. None of that cancelled Kell's breath or the hinge healing under my sternum. It only meant victory remained a road. Night thickened. I took late watch, stars hard, camp snore weather. I pulsed twin note hand width and reeled clean. I brushed flute note and felt sore readiness, not yet iron bar ready, soon. Nose dry, good. Toward end of watch, no lamps on the far road. Absence as mercy or aim. I told the next watch quiet and let him own it. Then I lay with knife wrap under palm and coin at the seam and the cave's old held breath far behind like a secret too wise to chase caravans in daylight. Sleep brought no speech from outlines, only a sense of columns filling one slow mark at a time. Child, boy, later marks unearned, a chain that could outlive empires if it never looked like one. Dawn would put us back into dust of lists. The master would curse, mules would argue with fate, I would haul, flinch when useful, keep Kell's silence watered, refuse display, answer hunters with sand and boredom, and keep one boy in every daylight count, while under the bone a smaller wrist flexed in inventory dark, waiting for the next throat that only a spent year could enter. I stood when sun cleared the hill, stretched until stick maps pulled, tied the rope belt, and took my place in line. No banner, no confession, no second shadow, no child at my heels for the morning count. Only Sami, errand stock, one boy still, walking south into the age of boards and name hunters, with a forever large enough to become a hidden people if he lived, and a single hard faith polished under every errand. The age that stays is power only while it stays secret, and secrecy is not silence alone. It is the craft of being counted wrong on purpose, forever, without ever giving the counters a miracle they can write clean. I checked the merchant coin in the seam before full sleep and found it still there, still unspent, still a cold circle against skin. Coin could not have bought Kell out of the fig column. Coin might buy bread, silence, a door on a coast, a bribe small enough not to look like a miracle. I left it sown. Spending is a trail. Trails are how lists grow legs. The creek argued on. I listened until the argument became lullaby, and the lullaby became the sound of a road that would carry boards and hunters and the boy who intended to outlive both by never giving them a clean miracle to write. One boy still, ages under bone, dust of lists on the tongue already, and under the dust a vow older than this chapter and newer than the cave. Remain miscounted on purpose and make the miscount look like weather.